Julian Sinclair was 35 years old, and until that Friday evening, he believed he'd finally found a woman who loved him for who he was, not what he had. He drove a used Honda. He lived in a Brooklyn brownstone he told everyone he rented. He let his fiancée, Camille, believe he was simply a comfortable operations manager, never once mentioning that he was actually a billionaire who owned the company outright. That night, he slid out a small velvet box and revealed a $3,000 ring across the table at the restaurant where he'd first told her he loved her. Watching her face for the truth he'd spent 2 years too afraid to ask for directly, her smile died instantly. She called the ring pathetic, said she refused to shrink her life for him, compared it cruelly to a friend's husband's ring, then stood up in front of the entire restaurant and walked out, ending the engagement without a single backward glance. Julian sat alone at that table, devastated but eerily calm. What Camille didn't know was that this dinner was a test, and she had just failed it spectacularly. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm didn't wake Julian Sinclair. He was already up. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom, listening to the city come alive outside his window. Brooklyn in the early morning had its own sound. A garbage truck grinding 2 blocks over. A dog barking somewhere below. The subway rumbling faint and deep beneath the street like a slow heartbeat. He knew every sound. He'd been listening to them for 6 years, ever since he'd quietly bought this brownstone through a holding company and moved in like a man simply renting the place. That was the point. He swung his legs off the bed and stood. The room was clean and plain. A dark wood dresser, a queen bed with a gray linen comforter. No art on the walls, just a single framed photo of his grandmother on the nightstand. No flashy furniture, no walk-in closet stuffed with designer suits. Nothing that would make a visitor think twice about who lived here. That was also the point. Julian padded to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and let the water run cold for 30 seconds before stepping in. A habit from years ago that he'd never quit. He got dressed without much thought. Dark jeans, a clean button-down shirt, untucked. Shoes that were good quality but not showy. Broken in enough to look like a man who didn't obsess over things like shoes. Downstairs, he made coffee in a plain drip machine and stood at the kitchen window while it brewed. Outside, a woman walked a stroller past the front steps. A delivery van idled at the corner. Ordinary. All of it, ordinary. He preferred it that way. By most accounts, Julian Sinclair was a regional operations manager at Sinclair Atlantic, a mid-sized logistics and real estate firm with offices in 4 cities. He drove a gray Honda Civic, 7 years old, with a small crack in the rear bumper he kept meaning to fix. He packed his own lunch 3 days a week. He wore the same rotation of sensible work clothes. He declined when coworkers suggested expensive happy-hour spots, pleading budget, and nobody thought twice about it because he played the part so well and had played it for so long that he'd stopped feeling like he was acting at all. The truth was something else entirely. Sinclair Atlantic was his, every brick of it. He'd built it from a one-man freight brokerage in his late 20s into a privately held conglomerate worth more than most people in his life could comfortably imagine. Real estate holdings in 3 states, logistics contracts with companies most people had heard of, a team of 32 employees who called him Mr. Sinclair in meetings, and had no idea the quiet man in the good but not flashy shoes had founded the entire operation before his 30th birthday. Only 2 people in the world knew the full truth of it. One was his grandmother, Odessa. The other was Theo Banks. Camille had moved in 8 months ago, after 2 years together and 6 months of being engaged. She kept a small dish of gold rings on the bathroom counter and had rearranged his kitchen in a way he'd quietly accepted. She was smart, ambitious, and beautiful in a way that was precise, like she'd thought carefully about how to present herself and executed the plan perfectly. Julian had loved that about her once, the discipline of it, the drive. Dinner that evening started fine. She'd made pasta, which she was good at, and opened a bottle of wine he'd brought home from a work trip. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, and for a while things felt easy between them. Then Camille mentioned the watch. "Derek got Marcus one of those Audemars for their anniversary," she said, twisting pasta onto her fork. "The big one. Rose gold. I looked it up. 30-something thousand." Julian looked up from his plate. "That's a lot of watch," he said. "That's a lot of love," she said, and her smile was light, almost playful, but her eyes weren't smiling. They were measuring. He let it go. But then she brought up the promotion. Word had apparently made it to her. Some mention of an internal restructuring at Sinclair Atlantic, a senior director position with a title bump and a salary she'd clearly already researched. "People are saying it's practically yours if you want it," she said. "Why haven't you pushed for it?" Julian kept his voice even. "It's not the right move right now. Not the right move." She set down her fork. "Julian, what are you waiting for? We're not getting younger. I'm not going to pretend I don't want more than this." She gestured at the kitchen, the simple appliances, the modest table, and the gesture was small, but he caught it. He caught all of it. He gave her a vague answer about timing. She dropped the subject with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Later, when she mentioned the upcoming girls' trip, her second in 6 weeks, and he asked gently, "Which friend this time?" she said, "You know, the usual crowd," and changed the subject before he could follow up. He called Theo from the car the next morning. "You still haven't told her." Theo didn't say it like a question. "No. 2 years, Julian. 6 months of an engagement. I know how long it's been." Through the phone, Julian could hear Theo shifting in his chair. The man was constitutionally incapable of sitting still when he was frustrated. "She's going to find out eventually," Theo said. "You can't run this company forever without—" "She doesn't need to find out from me until I know what I'm actually dealing with." A pause. "And what are you dealing with?" Julian watched the light turn green and pulled through the intersection. The Honda's engine made its familiar small noise, a faint rattle behind the dash that he'd never bothered fixing. "I don't know yet," he said. Theo was quiet for a moment. "Your father." "Don't. I'm going to anyway." Another pause, shorter this time. "Your father was a good man who fell in love with the wrong woman and gave her everything before he understood who she was. I know. You've told me. But Julian, you're not your father. And hiding what you have doesn't protect you. It just delays the moment you have to find out the truth." Julian didn't answer right away. He thought about his father, the version of him that existed in his memory before everything fell apart. A generous man. An open man. A man who trusted too quickly and lost too completely. Watching someone he loved drain what he'd spent a lifetime building the moment the money stopped being interesting enough. Julian had been 19 when it happened. He had not forgotten. "I hear you," Julian said finally, "but you're not changing anything." "Not yet." Theo let out a long breath. "All right. It's your life." "It is," Julian said. "Thanks for the reminder." That night, Camille fell asleep early. Julian sat in the kitchen alone, the overhead light low, a glass of water in front of him that he hadn't touched. The apartment was quiet. He could hear her breathing down the hall, slow and even. He sat with the dinner in his head, the watch comment, the gesture at the kitchen walls, the smile that didn't reach her eyes. The girls' trip she'd deflected so smoothly, like she'd practiced the pivot. Maybe she had. He turned the thought over slowly, the way he turned over every problem, not with anger, but with patience. He was a man who'd learned to think clearly under pressure, to strip things down to what was actually true versus what he wanted to be true. What was actually true was this: he didn't know who Camille was. When the comfort was gone. He'd never let her see what happened when the comfort was gone, and the only way to know, the only real way, was to show her. He pulled his phone off the table and opened the browser, typed slowly. Diamond engagement rings under $3,000. He scrolled through the results for a long time. Then he set the phone down, folded his hands on the table, and stared at the wall. He knew what he had to do. The jewelry store was on a quiet block in Midtown, the kind of place with soft lighting and carpet the color of cream. A man in a gray vest greeted Julian at the door and guided him toward a long glass case without asking too many questions. He had the practiced warmth of someone who read customers quickly. Julian told him his budget up front. $3,000, he said, maybe a little under. The jeweler didn't flinch. He was professional enough not to. He simply nodded and shifted toward a section of the case Julian hadn't looked at yet. Smaller stones, simpler settings, the rings that didn't catch light from across the room. "This one's popular," the jeweler said, sliding a tray forward. "Round cut, white gold band. Clean. Classic." Julian picked it up, turned it in his fingers. The stone was small but not cheap-looking. Honest. The kind of ring a man gave when a ring was the most he could give. "I'll take it," Julian said. The jeweler paused, just slightly. "Would you like to see a few others first? We have some very nice options in the 4 to 5 range, if you wanted to." "This one's fine," Julian said. "It's what I can manage right now." He said it evenly. No embarrassment, no hesitation. The jeweler nodded and didn't push again. Theo met him for lunch 2 days later. A deli on Fulton Street with wobbly tables and sandwiches that were too big to eat without making a mess of yourself. They'd been eating here since before Sinclair Atlantic had a second employee. Julian slid the small velvet box across the table. Theo opened it, looked at the ring for a moment, then looked at Julian. "This is the plan," Theo said. It wasn't a question. "That's the plan." Theo closed the box and handed it back. He picked up his sandwich, took a bite, chewed slowly. Julian recognized the silence. It was the silence Theo used when he was deciding how honest to be. "You understand," Theo said, "that if you're wrong about her, this doesn't just hurt. It means you spent 2 years, plus whatever comes next, and you still end up alone. Except now, you've confirmed your worst fear. And there's no softening that. I know. You lose either way if you're wrong. That's what I'm saying. You've been protecting yourself your whole adult life. You've been careful about every decision, every person, every piece of this thing you've built." He nodded at the box. "And you're gambling all of it on a $3,000 ring." Julian set the box on the table between them. "I'm not gambling. I'm finding out." "That's the same thing." "No." Julian shook his head. "A gamble is when you don't know the odds. I know the odds. I've been watching her for 2 years. He paused. "I need to know what she does when she thinks I'm the limit, when there's no more coming. Because if I merge my life with hers, the real life, all of it, and I'm wrong about who she is, I don't get to undo that. My father couldn't undo it either." Theo was quiet. "I need to know," Julian said again, quieter this time. Theo exhaled through his nose and looked out the window at the street. "All right," he said. "Then let's find out." That same night, across the city, Camille sat cross-legged on the bed with her phone in her lap. She didn't know Julian was already in motion. She typed quickly, the way she always did when she was frustrated. "I love him, but I'm serious when I say I cannot spend the rest of my life like this. Keisha's husband just got her a $10,000 bracelet for their anniversary. Derek Marcus literally wears a $30,000 watch. I'm a marketing director. I work hard. I have taste. I deserve a ring that actually reflects that." Tasha replied after a minute. "What did Julian say about the ring?" "That's the thing. He hasn't said anything specific. Just that he's working on it." "Tasha, I've been patient. I've been so patient. I'm tired of patient. A longer pause this time before Tasha wrote back. I hear you. I just think, maybe have the actual conversation with him before you decide what it means. Camille stared at the response, then typed, You sound like his lawyer, LOL. Tasha sent back a laughing emoji. But she didn't say anything else. Julian called the restaurant the following morning. Maison Rue, a French place in the West Village with low ceilings and warm light, and tables close enough together that you had to lean in to be heard. He'd told Camille he loved her at the corner table near the window, 2 years ago on a rainy Tuesday in March. She'd cried a little and then laughed at herself for crying, and the moment had felt completely real. He asked for that same table. He told Camille the dinner was the night she'd been waiting for. The ring upgrade she deserved. She kissed him on the cheek and smiled the biggest smile he'd seen from her in months. The night before the dinner, Camille called 2 friends. Julian could hear her voice, bright and certain, drifting down the hall from the bedroom. He's finally doing it right, she said. I knew he'd come through. In the kitchen, Julian confirmed the reservation on his phone. He set the velvet box on the counter beside his keys, where he'd remember it in the morning. He did not hear what she was saying down the hall. He didn't need to. He already knew what he needed to know. The restaurant was warm and dim, the way Julian remembered it. Candlelight on white tablecloths. The soft sound of French being spoken somewhere near the bar. The corner table by the window was exactly as it had been 2 years ago, right down to the small vase with a single white flower in the center. Camille walked in ahead of him. She was wearing the navy dress she saved for occasions she considered important. Her hair was done. She'd spritzed perfume in the car and checked her reflection in the visor mirror twice before getting out. She was practically glowing. This place, she said, sliding into her seat. She looked around with a slow, satisfied smile, like she was taking inventory. I've always loved this place. I know you have, Julian said. The waiter brought water and menus. Camille barely looked at hers. She was talking about a girl at work who'd just gotten engaged, about the venue that girl was looking at in the Hudson Valley, about how she'd already started a mental list of florists she liked. Her hands moved when she talked. She laughed easily. She was already somewhere else in her head, somewhere bright and expensive and exactly the right size. Julian listened. He nodded when it was time to nod. The food came. They ate. Camille ordered the salmon and didn't finish it, too keyed up to eat much. She kept glancing at Julian's jacket pocket. He waited until the plates were cleared. Then he reached into his pocket and set the small velvet box on the table between them. Camille's breath caught. She put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes went wide. Julian, she whispered. Go ahead, he said. She reached for it. She opened it. The smile didn't leave her face immediately. It took a second, the way light takes a second to fade when you flip a switch. One moment it was there, bright and full, and then it simply wasn't. Her eyes stayed on the ring. The silence stretched. This is it, she said. It wasn't a question. It was something else, something flat. That's it, Julian said. She looked up at him. The warmth was gone from her face. In its place was something he recognized, though he'd only seen flickers of it before. Something hard and assessing, the look of a woman doing math. Julian, her voice had dropped. This is $3,000, closer to $2,800. I can see that. She set the box down and pushed it slightly away from her, the way you'd push away a plate you didn't order. I can see exactly what this is. It's a ring. It's an insult. Her voice cracked on the last word. Not from tears, from pressure. Do you know what Keisha's husband got her? Do you know what that ring cost? I'm not Keisha's husband. No. She laughed once, short and humorless. No, you're not. She looked around the restaurant, then back at him. Her voice was still low, but the edges of it had gone sharp. I have worked for everything I have. I have built something. I have a career. I have a reputation. I have people in my life who expect a certain—" She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. "I did not sign up to shrink my life for you, Julian. I didn't. I thought you understood that. Tell me what you thought you signed up for." The question landed quietly. She didn't seem to hear it as anything other than weakness. "More than this," she gestured at the box. "A lot more than this." At the table nearest the window, a couple had stopped talking. The woman was looking at her water glass with careful attention. The man was very still. 2 tables over, an older gentleman in a sport coat had turned his head slightly, not looking directly but listening. Camille didn't seem to notice any of them. She pulled the engagement ring from her left hand. The one Julian had given her 6 months ago, modest then, too, though she'd worn it without complaint through the winter. She set it on the table beside the velvet box. 2 rings, side by side, in the candlelight. "I'm done," she said. She picked up her clutch, stood, smoothed the front of her dress with both hands, a composed, automatic gesture. "I'm sorry, Julian. I really am. But I can't do this." She walked out, not rushed, not stumbling. She walked out the way someone walks out of a meeting they've already mentally left. Straight-backed, chin up, heels clicking on the hardwood floor until the door swung shut behind her and the restaurant went quiet again. Julian sat. He looked at the 2 rings on the table. The candle between them flickered once. Around him, people slowly resumed their evenings. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone laughed softly near the bar. The waiter appeared at a respectful distance, unsure whether to approach. Julian straightened in his chair. He folded his napkin once and set it beside his plate. "Check, please," he said. Outside, the air was cold and clean. The street was quiet. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the velvet box in his jacket pocket, Camille's ring in his palm. He looked at it once. Then he put it in his pocket, too. He called Theo. Theo picked up on the second ring. "How'd it go?" Julian looked down the empty street. His voice was steady. "I need to know everything," he said. "Not just what I've noticed. Everything. Who she's been talking to, where she's been going, what she's been doing. All of it." A pause. "Julian." She walked out, Theo. A beat. "So now I need to know why." Julian was at his desk by 7:15. The Sinclair Atlantic offices sat on the 14th floor of a glass building in Lower Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines. The kind of quiet that only expensive buildings have, soundproofed from the street below, climate-controlled, humming softly with the sound of money at work. Julian's office, by design, looked like a senior manager's office. Not the owner's. No nameplate on the door beyond J. Sinclair. Operations. A standard desk. A standard chair. The only personal item was a framed photo of his grandmother Odessa, taken in her garden, squinting into the sun. He set his coffee down, opened his laptop, started reading the overnight freight reports from the Charleston hub. His hands were steady. His face was neutral. To anyone passing in the hall, he was just a man at work on a Tuesday morning. Inside, it was different. He'd slept maybe 2 hours. The kind of sleep that isn't really sleep. Just lying still in the dark, your mind running the same short reel over and over. Her face, when she opened the box. The way the warmth went out of it. The 2 rings sitting side by side in the candlelight. Like evidence. He'd felt it all in those 2 hours. The full weight of it. The grief. The anger. The particular humiliation of a man who built everything carefully and still got it wrong. But he'd also made a decision. Grief could wait. Understanding couldn't. Theo came in at 8:30, coffee in one hand, folder in the other. He closed the door behind him without being asked. He sat down across from Julian and looked at him the way a man looks at someone he's known for 15 years, reading him completely, saying nothing about what he sees. "You look terrible," Theo said. "I know. You sleeping?" "Some." Julian moved the freight report aside. I need you to go through everything. Quietly. Theo nodded once. I already started last night. What are you thinking? Financial? Communications? Both. Julian leaned back in his chair. The shared card first. I want to see every charge going back 12 months. Anything recurring, anything I can't immediately explain. Theo wrote something down. And communications, Julian said. I'm not asking you to hack anything, but you know people. People who can look at patterns without leaving fingerprints. I know people, Theo confirmed. There's a name. Julian said it carefully, like he was still deciding how much weight to give it. I saw it in her notifications a few times over the past few months. I didn't think much of it. I'm thinking about it now. You remember it? Andre. Julian paused. That's all I had. Just the first name on the screen. Never clicked through. Theo wrote it down. After Theo left, Julian sat still for a moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small, worn notebook. The kind he used for personal notes, not work ones. He turned to a blank page and started writing. Not angry words, just a list. The name, Andre. 3 times at least, maybe 4. Notifications on her phone. She always turned the screen down when I was close. He wrote that down and moved to the next thing. The restaurant charge, $42, recurring. Every 2 to 3 weeks. Café Lune, I asked once. She said it was lunch with someone from the office. I didn't push. He'd looked it up last night at 2 in the morning. Café Lune wasn't a lunch spot. It was an evening wine bar in Park Slope, with low lighting and a short menu and no outdoor seating. Not the kind of place you go with someone from the office on a Tuesday afternoon. He wrote that down too. Her schedule. 3 Fridays in October, she said she was working late. I checked the parking garage receipts she'd forwarded for reimbursement. She was out by 4 each time. The hotel in Albany last November. Marketing conference. I found the event. It ran Thursday only. She was gone Thursday and Friday. He looked at the list. He had looked at each of these things individually and found a way to explain them. The name, probably a vendor. The wine bar, probably happy hour, she'd misspoken. The schedule gaps, probably flex time. She worked long weeks. He had explained them all away. Not because the explanations were good, because the alternative, that she was running a second life alongside his, was something he hadn't been ready to hold. He closed the notebook. That was the part that sat in his chest like a stone. Not just what she'd done, the fact that the signs had been there, quiet and patient, and he had chosen not to see them. His father had done the same thing, right up until the end. His phone buzzed at 4:50. Theo. Julian picked up before the second vibration. Tell me. I've got a name, Theo said. His voice was careful, the way it got when something was worse than expected. Andre Lockhart, real estate developer out of Fort Greene. His number shows up 31 times across her call logs from August through last week. Texts are even more. My guy says it's consistent. Never late night, never too early. Scheduled. Like a standing arrangement. Julian didn't respond right away. 31 times. How far back does it start? He asked. August, Theo said. 4 months into the engagement. Julian was still holding the phone. August, he said again. Not a question. Just letting the word sit there so he could feel the full shape of it. 4 months into the engagement. He'd had the ring on her finger since April. By August, she was already 31 calls deep with someone else. Yeah, Theo said quietly. Julian set the phone down on his desk, put it on speaker, and stood up. He walked to the window. 14 floors below, the street moved the way streets always do. Taxis, people, pigeons, all of it indifferent. The city had no opinion about what he was feeling right now. What else? Julian asked. That's what I need to come in and show you. A pause. In person. Theo was there in 20 minutes. He came in carrying a manila folder and sat down across from Julian the same way he had that morning. Door closed, no preamble, reading Julian's face before saying a word. He opened the folder and slid a single printed page across the desk. Julian looked at it. A phone record summary. Dates, durations, frequency. 31 outgoing calls. 14 incoming. The calls averaged 12 minutes each. Some ran longer. My contact also pulled together some second-hand account, Theo said. Nothing illegal. Just someone who knows Lockhart. Someone who's had drinks with him. Heard him talk. Julian looked up. Theo leaned forward, resting his forearms on his desk. Lockhart thinks Julian, you are an ex. A long-distance ex. Someone Camille was still untangling herself from. The room was very quiet. Say that again, Julian said. She told him you were basically out of the picture, Theo said. An old relationship she was wrapping up. Long distance, complicated history, but mostly over. He paused. He has no idea about the engagement, Julian. No idea she was still wearing a ring. No idea there was a wedding being planned. Julian turned and looked back out the window. He stayed that way for a long moment. He had walked into that restaurant last night believing the worst possible version of this story was that Camille didn't love him the way he loved her, that she cared too much about money and too little about him. That was the wound he'd been prepared to carry. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't a woman who had drifted. This was a woman who had built two separate worlds and furnished each one with a different lie. She hadn't slipped into something behind his back. She had constructed it. She had looked at Andre Lockhart and told him a story that made Julian invisible. Not a fiancé, not a partner of 2 years, not a man who had sat across from her father at Thanksgiving and meant every word he said. Just a loose end. An ex being finalized, and she had looked at Julian and kept planning a wedding. The scale of it landed on him like something physical. His jaw tightened. He breathed through it. Lockhart, Julian said, turning back from the window. What kind of man is he? Theo seemed to weigh the question carefully. Successful. Legitimate. My contact says he's not a player. He's the kind of guy who gets serious fast, talks about the future. He apparently told someone he thought Camille was the one. He paused. He's being used too, Julian. Julian sat down. He thought about that for a moment. Another man out there who had no idea what was happening. Another man being kept warm as a backup option while Camille waited to see which way the numbers fell. She ran 2 of us at the same time, Julian said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just him organizing it out loud. She kept both stories clean enough that neither one of us would accidentally find the seams. That's what it looks like, Theo said. That's not panic, Julian said. That's not someone making a bad decision in a weak moment. He picked up the phone record summary, looked at it once, and set it back down. That's someone who does this on purpose. Someone who thinks this way. Theo didn't disagree. Julian was quiet for a while. The afternoon light had shifted, going golden and flat through the windows. Outside, the city was still moving, still indifferent. He thought about the notebook in his desk drawer, the list he'd made that morning, the wine bar, the schedule gaps, the hotel in Albany. Every item he had explained away because he hadn't been ready to see them for what they were. He was ready now. Don't touch anything yet, Julian said. His voice was steady, measured. The same voice he used in board meetings when a deal was starting to go sideways and he needed to think 3 steps ahead. I don't want her to know we're looking. And I don't want Lockhart spooked either. Theo nodded. There's more to this, Julian said. I can feel it. What she told him, what she told me, that's 2 lies. But a person who builds something this carefully doesn't stop at 2 lies. He met Theo's eyes. Keep digging. Finances, schedule, anything that doesn't line up. All of it. Theo closed the folder. I'll have more by Thursday. Julian nodded once. And Theo? He waited until Theo was already at the door. Good work. Theo gave a small nod and left without another word. Julian turned back to the window. The city moved below him, bright and busy and completely unaware. He didn't grieve. He didn't rage. He started thinking. The rumor started on a Tuesday. Julian didn't plant it. He didn't have to. Sinclair Atlantic was a real company with real reach. And when a merger conversation gets close enough to the surface, people talk. Someone at a law firm mentions a name. Someone's husband overhears a lunch. By the time it filters down into the kind of social circles where people compare ring sizes and vacation houses, the story has already grown legs. He found out about it the way he found out about most things, through Theo, who had a contact who knew someone in Camille's orbit. "Word is, she's been asking around," Theo said, over the phone that evening, quietly, asking what people know about Sinclair Atlantic, who runs it, what it's worth. Julian was sitting in the kitchen of his brownstone, a glass of water in front of him, untouched. "How long?" he asked. "Since yesterday." Julian nodded slowly. He picked up the glass, took a sip, set it back down. Let her ask. She called on Thursday. His phone buzzed on the desk at 7:14 in the evening. "Camille." He looked at it for 2 full rings before he picked up. "Hey," he said, calm, neutral, like she'd called to confirm dinner plans. There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice came through, soft and careful, with just the right amount of trembling in it. "Julian." She exhaled his name like it cost her something. "I know I don't have any right to call you. I know that. I haven't been able to sleep." He didn't say anything. He let the silence sit. "I panicked," she said. "That night, I panicked. It wasn't about the ring. It wasn't about money. Everything hit me at once, and I didn't handle it the way I should have." Her voice caught. "I said awful things. I know I did. I keep hearing myself say them, and I hate it." Julian leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. "What did you panic about?" he asked. Quiet, genuinely curious sounding. "Everything moving so fast," she said. "The future, the pressure. I think I just got scared, and I took it out on you, and that was wrong. That was so wrong, Julian, and I'm sorry." She was good. He could acknowledge that. The voice was soft, but not whiny. The words were just vague enough to sound honest. She wasn't over-explaining, which was smart, because over-explaining was how people gave themselves away. But he knew what she'd been asking around about. He knew what had shifted between the walkout and this phone call. "I've been thinking about everything we built," she continued. "All these months of planning, the deposits I made. I put real money toward this, Julian. Our future. Because I believed in it. In us." He went still. "What deposits?" he asked. A small pause, just half a beat too short for her to have thought it through. "The venue," she said, "and the caterer. I didn't want to stress you out with the details, so I just handled it. I've been handling a lot of the back-end stuff quietly." She let out a soft, almost proud little breath, like she was presenting evidence of her loyalty, proof she'd been invested all along. "I took out a small loan against the household account, just to hold the dates. I knew we'd sort it all out eventually." Julian's hand tightened once around the phone. The household account. The joint account he'd set up for shared expenses. Groceries, utilities, the occasional weekend trip. The account he checked quarterly at most, because the numbers were small and he'd never had a reason to look harder. She'd been counting on exactly that. He kept his voice completely flat. "When did you do that?" "A few months back," she said, "before everything fell apart. I just wanted things to be ready." Another pause. "I know I should have told you. I should have talked to you about it. I was so excited, Julian. I wanted it to be perfect." He let her finish. He sat with it for a moment. The easy confidence in her voice when she said it. The way she had folded the loan into proof of her commitment. Like debt she'd taken out secretly against their shared account was actually a love language. She was proud of it. That was the part that settled into him like something cold. "Thank you for telling me that," he said. "Of course," she said, the relief in her voice already warming. "I want to be honest with you. I want to fix this." "I'll look into it," he said. A pause. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll look into it," he said again, without changing his tone at all. "I'll be in touch, Camille." He hung up before she could say another word. He set the phone down on the desk and opened his laptop. It took him 4 minutes to log into the joint account and find the withdrawal record. A personal loan, drawn against the account 6 months ago. He looked at the number. He closed the laptop. He picked up his phone and sent Theo a single message. She confirmed the loan. Get the attorney. Tasha Boudreau had Camille's number saved under C in her phone. Not a nickname, not a heart emoji. Just the letter. That said something, Julian thought, when she told him. She called on a Saturday morning, just after 9. Julian was at his kitchen table with coffee he hadn't touched yet when the number came up. Unknown. He almost let it go to voicemail. "Is this Julian Sinclair?" The voice was steady, cautious. "Who's asking?" "Tasha. Tasha Boudreau." A beat. "Camille's friend, or—" "I was." He set the coffee down. "I'm listening." She didn't ease into it. He appreciated that. "She called me Wednesday night," Tasha said. "Asked me to back up her story about the loan. Said if anyone asked, I should say she told me about it months ago, and that you both knew. She wanted a witness." Her voice was tight, but controlled. "And then yesterday, she called back and asked me to cover for the Andre thing, too. Said he was just a friend. Asked me to confirm that, if it ever came up." Julian kept his voice even. "And you said?" "I said no to both." A pause. "And then I looked up your number." The line went quiet for a moment. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past on the street. "Why?" he asked. Not accusatory, just honest. Tasha was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped, like something old had risen to the surface. "Because she's done it before," she said. "Not just once. It's what she does, Julian. She finds 2 men, runs them at the same time, and waits to see which one clears the bar. Whichever one falls short gets dropped." He didn't speak. "There was a guy," Tasha continued, "about 6 years ago. A friend of my cousin's. His name was Marcus. He dated Camille for almost a year, thought things were serious. She was telling him everything he wanted to hear. Meanwhile, she was seeing someone else the whole time. A guy with a bigger salary, nicer apartment. The moment the other guy became the better option, Marcus didn't even get a real conversation. She just disappeared on him. Her breath came out slow. He was wrecked. My cousin told me the whole thing, and She stopped. "I stayed friends with her anyway. I told myself it was one bad decision. I shouldn't have." Julian absorbed this quietly. He stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the street. "She had a script ready," Tasha added. "For me. She knew exactly what she was going to ask me to say. That's not someone who panicked, Julian. That's someone who has a system." He told Theo that afternoon. Theo listened without interrupting, which was not his default. When Julian finished, Theo was quiet for a moment. "She's done this before," Theo said slowly, like he was tasting each word. "It wasn't about you specifically. You were just the one who almost made it to the finish line without her getting caught." "That's how it looks," Julian said. Theo exhaled. "All right. I'll set up a call with the attorney." The 3 of them met 2 days later. Julian, Theo, and a woman named Patricia Osei, a discreet attorney Julian had used twice before for sensitive company matters. She had a face that didn't give away much, and a habit of organizing papers into tight, precise stacks while she talked. She laid it out clean and simple. The loan documentation pulled directly from the joint account. 6 months old, drawn without Julian's signature or knowledge. The messages Theo's investigator had pulled together confirming exactly what Camille had told André, that Julian was an ex, that things were nearly finished, that she was almost free. Tasha's account, written and signed, detailing both the current cover-up request and the pattern Camille had run 6 years earlier. Patricia set the last page down squarely on top of the stack. "This is complete," she said. Julian looked at the file on the table. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. Everything in it was exact. "The loan becomes a legal matter the moment we notify the bank," Patricia said. "I'd recommend doing that as part of the same sequence as any confrontation, not before, so she doesn't have time to move money or manufacture a counter-narrative." Julian nodded. He'd already been thinking about timing. "She's been trying to get an invitation to my grandmother's house," he said. "She wants to smooth things over with the family." "Odessa." Theo looked at him. "You're thinking Odessa's place?" "She cares what those people think of her," Julian said. "More than almost anything. If it's going to happen, it should happen there, in front of the people whose opinions she's spent 2 years working on." Theo nodded slowly. "I'll call Odessa." "She already knows something is coming," Julian said. "She's been patient." He picked up the evidence file and held it for a moment before setting it back down. Then Tasha's voice came back to him. "That's not someone who panicked. That's someone who has a system." "One more thing," he said. "André Lockhart. He's been lied to just as much as I have. He deserves to hear this directly, not through rumors afterward." Tasha had said the same thing, almost word for word, when she'd called. "I'll reach out to him," Theo said, quietly. A vague pretext, something that gets him there without telegraphing what's coming. Julian looked at the table, the file, the stack of papers Patricia had organized so carefully. "Then we're ready," he said. Camille arrived 20 minutes early. That was the first tell. She never arrived early to anything. But tonight, she stood on Odessa Sinclair's front steps in a cream-colored blouse and pressed slacks, a bottle of wine tucked under one arm, and a small bouquet of white flowers in her hand. Deliberate, practiced. Julian watched from the hallway as Odessa opened the door. "Mrs. Sinclair." Camille's voice was soft, warm. She extended the flowers first. "These are for you. I know they're a small thing, but I wanted to bring something." Odessa looked at the flowers, then at Camille. She smiled in that quiet, unhurried way she had, the kind of smile that didn't give a single thing away. "Come in, baby," she said. "Come in out of the cold." Julian stepped back into the kitchen before Camille could see him. He listened from the hallway as Camille settled into the living room, the soft clink of Odessa setting the flowers in water, the low murmur of early conversation. He'd heard Camille perform before. Dinner parties, family events, the careful way she worked a room. He knew her rhythms. He knew when the warmth was real and when it was a tool she was holding. Tonight, every word was a tool. "I know I hurt him," Camille was saying. "I know what I did at that dinner was awful. I've been ashamed of it ever since." A small pause. I got scared. I let fear make me ugly. And I want to be better than that." Odessa said, just that. The sound of someone who has heard a great many things in 71 years and was not yet ready to confirm which category this fell into. "I love your grandson," Camille continued. "Whatever mistakes I've made, that part has always been true." Julian closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them and walked back to the kitchen counter where Theo was standing, arms crossed, expression flat. Theo looked at him, didn't say anything. Neither did Julian. Odessa's dining room was not large, but it was the kind of room that felt important. Dark wood table, 6 chairs, a sideboard along the wall with framed photographs going back decades. There was a picture of Julian, at maybe 12 years old, near the far end. Serious-faced, even then, standing next to his grandmother with his hands clasped in front of him like he was already trying to look grown. Camille noticed that photo. Julian saw her look at it. She didn't know he was watching. She crossed the room and picked it up gently, like she was handling something precious. She looked at it for a moment and then turned to Odessa with something that looked, if you didn't know better, like genuine tenderness. "He was so serious even as a kid," she said. "He was," Odessa said simply. She took the frame from Camille's hands, looked at it herself for a moment, and set it back exactly where it had been. The knock at the door came at 7:15. Odessa went to answer it. Camille was in the living room, and Julian was still in the kitchen with Theo. He heard the door open. He heard Odessa say warmly, "You must be Andre. Please come in. I'll take your coat." In the living room, Camille went still. Julian didn't see it. He felt it, the way a room changes pressure when something unexpected enters it. The tiny shift in sound, the absence of her voice in the middle of a sentence she'd been building. Then, carefully, nothing. Andre Lockhart appeared in the hallway, tall and unhurried, a navy jacket over a collared shirt, the easy bearing of a man who was used to walking into rooms where he didn't know everyone. He was polite. He shook Odessa's hand. He scanned the room the way people do when they're trying to get their bearings at an event they're not quite sure about. Camille stood near the window. Their eyes met. Something moved across her face. Not quite panic, not quite recognition. More like a card player who has just spotted two of their cards already on the table and needs a second to recalculate. "Camille," Andre said. His voice was careful. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I didn't know you would be either," she said. Her voice was almost steady. Almost? Andre looked around the room with a polite, uncertain smile. Who's hosting tonight?" "My grandson," Odessa said from the doorway. "Julian." Andre turned toward her. The smile didn't fall, but something behind it did. They sat down to dinner. Odessa had set the table simply. No extra flourishes, nothing that made it feel like an occasion, just plates and glasses and the low light of the fixture above the table. Bread in a basket in the center, water already poured. Camille had taken a seat with her back to the sideboard, the photographs behind her. Andre sat across. Theo sat at the end, quiet, watching his hands. Julian sat at the head of the table. He let a moment pass. Let the room settle. Let the sound of chairs and glasses and small, uneasy adjustments work itself out. Then he straightened slightly in his seat and set both hands flat on the table in front of him. The room went still. Julian looked at Camille first, then at Andre, then at no one in particular. "Before we eat," he said, "I want to be honest with everyone at this table. I should have been honest sooner. That's on me." His voice was level. No edge in it yet. Just the plain, clean sound of a man who had decided exactly what he was going to say, and in what order. Camille's hands moved to her lap. "Most of you know me as a regional operations manager at Sinclair Atlantic." He paused. "That's not what I am. I founded Sinclair Atlantic 11 years ago. I own it. The whole thing. The logistics division, the real estate portfolio, the holding company underneath it. All of it." He looked at the table. "The company is worth just over $900 million. The room absorbed that number the way a room absorbs a sound that doesn't quite make sense. A beat of silence where everyone quietly reassembles what they thought they knew." Andre blinked once, slowly. Camille said nothing. Her face had gone very still. "I kept that private on purpose," Julian continued. "I had reasons. They were personal, and they were mine. But I want that understood before anything else, because everything else matters more once you know it." He reached toward the folder sitting beside his plate. He didn't open it yet. He just rested one hand on top of it. "6 weeks before our engagement dinner," he said, looking at Camille now, steady and direct, "you took out a personal loan against our joint household account. $14,000. You used it to cover wedding deposits, venues, a caterer, a photographer. I never saw the statements." He tilted his head slightly. You counted on that. Camille drew a breath. Julian, that wasn't. I was trying to move things forward. You kept saying we'd figure out the finances, and nothing was getting done, so I just— The account was in both our names, Julian said. The loan was not. You signed it alone. You didn't tell me it existed? He paused. The bank's fraud department flagged it last week at my attorney's request. It's no longer a private matter. Her mouth closed. She looked down at the table, then back up. Her eyes moved, briefly, to Odessa, the last friendly face she thought she had in the room. Odessa looked back at her with that same unhurried expression, patient, giving nothing. Camille looked at André next. A mistake. Because Julian was already there. André. Julian's voice stayed the same. No heat in it, no cruelty. Just facts arriving in a line. Camille told you that I was an ex, that we were already finished, that she was just tying off loose ends. He opened the folder now and slid a single printed page toward the center of the table. These are message summaries, dates, and content. The last one is from 9 days before she walked out of our engagement dinner. Our engagement dinner, for a ring I bought her for an engagement that was still very much active. He let that settle. You didn't know there was an engagement. It was not a question. André was looking at the page. His jaw was tight. His hands were on the table and they were very still, the way hands get when a person is working hard to stay controlled. No, he said quietly. I didn't. Camille's voice came fast. André, I was going to tell you everything, the timing was complicated, and Julian and I were barely— You told me he was a long-distance ex. André's voice was not loud. It was the opposite of loud. You said you were finalizing things. Those were your words. Finalizing things. I know what I said. Then you know what you did. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes swept the table. Julian, steady. Theo, arms crossed, jaw set. Odessa, still and watching. André, not looking at her anymore. There was no angle. She had used every face in this room as a prop in a story she was writing for herself. And now they were all looking back at her from the same side of it. I made mistakes, she started. Her voice cracked slightly on the word mistakes, like she was hoping it would. I was scared, and I made bad decisions, and I know that doesn't— You weren't scared, Julian said simply. You were calculating. She stopped. The table was quiet. André pushed his chair back. The sound of it was clean and final in the small room. He stood, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, and straightened it with one careful motion. He looked at Julian. I'm sorry, he said. For whatever that's worth, I'm genuinely sorry. None of this was something I'd have agreed to. Julian nodded once. I know that. André didn't look at Camille again. He walked out into the hallway, and a moment later the front door opened and then closed, and the sound of his footsteps on the front steps faded into the night. Camille sat alone on her side of the table. The bread in the basket had gone cold. The water glasses were still full. No one had touched a single thing. The letter arrived at Camille's apartment on a Tuesday. It was formal, clean, the kind of document that doesn't apologize for what it says. Julian's attorney had filed the fraud inquiry with the bank the morning after the dinner, and the bank had moved quickly. The loan had been drawn against a joint account without the co-holder's knowledge or consent. The deposits made with it were traceable. The paper trail was complete. Camille hired a lawyer. Her lawyer looked at the evidence and told her quietly that fighting it would cost more than settling, so she settled. The number wasn't catastrophic on paper, but it wiped out most of what she'd saved over the past 3 years. Everything she'd been quietly stacking away toward the life she was building, the fun she never talked about but always referenced in her head when she needed to feel secure. Gone. Not all at once, but in a structured payment arrangement that would pull from her account every month for the next 2 years. And then there was the background check flag. Her company ran routine checks on employees moving into senior roles. The fraud inquiry, even settled, left a mark. Not a criminal record, but a mark. The kind of thing that makes a hiring manager pause, ask a quiet question to HR, and then quietly steer the promotion in a different direction. She found out in March, when a role she'd been angling for went to someone she'd trained herself. Nobody said why. Nobody had to. Word spread the way Julian had intended. Not through a post, not through a public statement, not through anything that could be called a scene. It moved person to person, in living rooms and over coffee, carried by two women who didn't need to exaggerate a single detail. Odessa told the people who mattered to her directly. She didn't dramatize it. She simply told the truth, plainly and completely, in the same unhurried tone she used for everything. The people she told were the same people Camille had been charming for 2 years, the women whose opinions she tracked, whose events she attended, whose approval she'd been quietly working to collect like currency. They listened. They asked a few questions. Then they went quiet, in the way people go quiet when they realize they've been used as part of someone else's performance. Tasha did her part differently. She didn't call anyone. She didn't organize a response. She simply stopped covering the small lies she'd been asked to carry, the alibi for one trip, the vague excuse for another. She let them fall. When people asked her directly, she answered directly. No embellishment, just what she knew. Then she called Camille. It was a short call. Tasha had been thinking about what she wanted to say for longer than Camille probably realized, working it over in the weeks since the dinner, finding the right words and then stripping them back until only the necessary ones were left. "I've been a bad friend to you," Tasha said. "By letting things go, I should have said something about years ago. That's on me. But I'm done now. I'm done covering, and I'm done pretending I don't know what I know. I wish you well. I really do. But we're finished." Camille said her name, said it again, with more force the second time. Tasha hung up. She sat for a while after that, in her kitchen, with her phone face down on the table and a cup of tea going cold in front of her. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel sad, exactly. She felt settled, like something that had been sitting at an angle for years had finally been straightened. Julian threw himself into work. Not as an escape. He'd done that before, and he knew the difference. This was forward motion, deliberate and clean. He and Theo restructured 2 divisions of Sinclair Atlantic that had been running lean for longer than they should have, brought in a new logistics director to handle the Southeast expansion, and closed a real estate acquisition in Atlanta that Julian had been eyeing for 18 months. Theo stopped by his office one afternoon in late spring, dropped into the chair across from Julian's desk, and said, "You look different." Julian looked up from the page he was reading. "How so?" "Less like you're carrying something." Theo shrugged. "I don't know. You just look lighter." Julian considered that. Maybe I am. He wasn't rushing toward anything. He wasn't building walls the way he used to either. He had lunch with people whose company he actually enjoyed. He took calls he would have redirected before. He stopped rehearsing every interaction 3 moves ahead, the way you do when you don't fully trust anyone in the room. It was slow, but it was real. 12 months after the dinner at Odessa's house, Julian pulled into the parking structure beneath Sinclair Atlantic's main office in his Honda. The same one, a little more worn now, still exactly what it had always been, and sat for a moment before getting out. He had gotten married 4 months earlier, quietly. A small ceremony, Odessa in the front row, Theo beside him. She had met him at a charity event when he was just a man in a plain suit who made her laugh. She'd learned about the company 6 weeks in, when he told her himself, deliberately, sitting across from her at a diner table over bad coffee. She'd looked at him for a long moment. Then she'd said, "Okay, does that change anything about dinner on Friday?" He'd thought about that moment a lot since then. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase 2 years, but it answered the question he'd been trying to answer his whole adult life, the one his father never got a real answer to. He got out of the car, locked it, walked toward the elevator. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.